लाइफ में लेना देना तो चलता रहता है। इधर फ्लेक्सी लोन से बोरो कर लिया और उधर बाय मॉम डैड का वेकेशन डन। शादी का डिसीजन लिया, फ्लेक्सी लोन से और बोरो किया। प्रमोशन मिला तो ये लो थोड़ा लोन वापस कर दिया। थैंक यू। नए इंटीरियर्स का दिल किया, फ्लेक्सी लोन से फिर थोड़ा ले लिया। ईयर एंड बोनस मिला तो इस बार लोन ज्यादा वापस कर दिया। लाइफ में लेना देना चलता रहेगा तो लोन्स में क्यों नहीं। इसीलिए फ्लेक्सी लोन फ्रॉम बजाज फिनसर्व एक ऐसा लोन जो जब चाहे बोरो करे, जैसे चाहे रीपे करे, वो भी चुटकी में। थिंक इट डन विद बजाज फिनसर्व।
हेलो, हर सीजन के लिए नए इंटीरियर्स?
हाँ, वो भी हर रूम के लिए।
फ्रिज, स्मार्टफोन या बड़ा टीवी?
तीनों क्यों नहीं?
अरे ये तो शॉपिंग लिस्ट में नहीं था।
सो अब शॉपिंग कार्ट में तो है। सॉरी।
अच्छा, नए आउटफिट्स की विश लिस्ट।
विश क्यों? Just add to cart and buy.
तो ये सब EMI पे?
और वो भी चुटकी में। On India's fastest growing EMI network. Think it done with Bajaj Finserv.
सर, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता। साहब, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता। हुजूर, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता।
अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान।
अपनों को खुशियां दिलाना आसान नहीं बनाते तो आगे कैसे बढ़ते। इसीलिए हम जो भी करते हैं उसे बेहतर बनाते आ रहे हैं, बनाते रहेंगे। बजाज फिनसर्व, थिंक इट डन।
माँ के बेडरूम का एसी या लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई, लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई, लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई। पुणे, पटना, चेन्नई, मथुरा या फिर बेगूसराय, या फिर बेगूसराय। नए घर के लिए चाहिए 4K टीवी हाई फाई, या फिर वाइफ को चाहिए लेटेस्ट स्टाइल। EMI है ना, EMI है ना, EMI। मॉड्यूलर किचन में पुराना फ्रिज क्यों है भाई?
शादी है नहीं, मैट्रेस पुराना है भाई। अक्खा इंडिया बोले भाई प्राइजेस है हाई। बेस्ट ही खरीदना है तो अपने EMI स्टोर पर आए।
EMI है ना, EMI।
अब काशी हो या वाशी, महंगा लगे तो EMI और बेस्ट ही चाहिए तो भी EMI, क्योंकि बजाज फिनसर्व का EMI है ना। विजिट www.emistore.com।
EMI है ना, EMI है ना, EMI।
धोखा है धोखा, धोखा ना खाओ जी। इंश्योरेंस फ्रॉड से बचना है बहुत जरूरी जी। वो एजेंट है या फ्रॉड पता लगाओ जी। एक्स्ट्रा ऑफर के झांसे में कहीं फंस ना जाओ जी।
अगर कोई अनजान कॉलर इंश्योरेंस पॉलिसी डिटेल्स मांगे तो कह देना उनको
मिलके स्कैम को एंड करो, हमेशा सेफ रहो जी।
Always verify the caller and do not surrender your insurance for attractive offers. हमेशा सावधान रहे, safe रहे. Issued in the interest of public awareness by Bajaj Finserv.
धोखा है धोखा, धोखा ना खाओ जी। जो होगा सो होगा ऐसे ना सोचो जी कॉल पे कोई पूछे OTP दो ना जी
तो कह देना उनको
मिलके स्कैम को एंड करो हमेशा सेफ रहो जी
Being a hero is all about heart. It's not about ruling the world. It's about owning it. It's not about winning a race. It's about delivering a smile to the human race. It's about a spirit that just cannot be confined by geographies. It's about the heart that beats for the future and a soul that echoes the values of generations. And yet, being a hero is never about the hero. It's about the millions who celebrate them. Hero Motorcorp, the motorcycle leader. There's a gush of wind that hums a sweet song. There's a gush of wind that fights like a hero to fill the world with possibility. There's a gush of wind that jumps across oceans and mountains, embracing the entire planet. There's a gush of wind that blows away darkness. There's a gush of wind that blows for humanity. Because at Hero, we care.
In 1868, the Tata Group was founded on a philosophy that put the community at the heart of its existence. Today, we are $100 billion global enterprise. Our today has been built on enduring values. Our today is about delivering excellence across business sectors. Our today is about building a future-ready nation. Our today has a strong foundation with community at its core. Our today is dedicated to the communities we serve. Our today is always about more than just today. Our today is a continuous journey for a better tomorrow. Tata, leadership with trust.
Behold, the story of victory, of life over malady. Behold the saga of power, of science over sickness. Behold the tale of triumph, of dedication over disease. Behold the rise and rise of Cadila Pharmaceuticals Limited, one of India's largest privately held pharmaceutical companies based out of Ahmedabad, Gujarat, India. Cadila Pharmaceuticals was born out of the vision of a legend who left an indelible mark in the chronicles of Indian pharmaceuticals industry. He was Indravadan Ambalal Modi, the founder chairman of the company, rightfully christened as the medicine man of India. His vision to alleviate pain of the underprivileged through research-driven innovations has been driving Cadila Pharmaceuticals for more than 6 decades now. Innovations which are backed by the key strengths of the company, the state-of-the-art manufacturing and research facilities. The flagship manufacturing facility at Dholka, Gujarat, sprawls over 100 acres. This avant-garde facility is US FDA approved, besides meeting most of the stringent quality standards across the globe. It manufactures tablets, capsules, injectables, liquids, and orals. The second formulations manufacturing facility is located at Samba in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. The API facilities at Ankleshwar, Gujarat, manufacture a large number of key APIs and intermediates at this US FDA and ISO 9002 and ISO 14001 accredited plant. The company also has set up its first ever overseas formulation manufacturing facility at Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. This world-class facility is the only WHO CGMP compliant manufacturing facility in the region. More than 850 products spread across 12 specialties with many of India's top brands in its basket. Great goals are defined by far-sighted vision and achieved by seamless teamwork. A multicultural, multilingual and multinational workforce of over 7,000 employees is truly the propelling power of the company. Not just in the domestic market, the company has a wide global footprint with over 1,000 marketing authorizations across 85 countries. Its international sales force of over 150 highly diversified and versatile personnel lends it an outreach that blankets the globe. As the company grows, so does its commitment to research. Manned by more than 350 scientists, the R&D facilities of Cadila Pharmaceuticals at Dholka, Gujarat is an institution of breakthrough innovations. To take the focus on innovation to the next level, it partners with leading international companies to discover newer treatments. The Cadila Pharmaceuticals Group is gigantic. Its group companies complement and expand the dynamic vision of the company across new avenues of healthcare and newer fast-paced business areas. Cadila Pharmaceuticals is a gentle giant. Decades of dedicated research, groundbreaking healthcare innovations, and worldwide impact proves the infinite potential of one powerful emotion. Care. The success of Cadila Pharmaceuticals bears testimony to the fact that the care continues.
आने वाले कल की दस्तक हमें सुनाई देती है, नई मंजिल है जिस ओर हमें वो दिशा दिखाई देती है। नए इंडिया का नया जोश, नए इंडिया का नया जोश, नए जोश से निकल पड़े हम, आने वाला कल होगा हमारा। नए इंडिया का नया जोश।
और नए इंडिया के सफर में टेक्नोलॉजी की शक्ति लेकर आपका भागीदार रहेगा रिलायंस। नए इंडिया का नया जोश।
लाइफ में लेना देना तो चलता रहता है। इधर फ्लेक्सी लोन से बोरो कर लिया और उधर बाय मॉम डैड का वेकेशन डन। शादी का डिसीजन लिया, फ्लेक्सी लोन से और बोरो किया। प्रमोशन मिला तो ये लो थोड़ा लोन वापस कर दिया। थैंक यू। नए इंटीरियर्स का डील किया, फ्लेक्सी लोन से फिर थोड़ा ले लिया। ईयर एंड बोनस मिला तो इस बार लोन ज्यादा वापस कर दिया। लाइफ में लेना देना चलता रहेगा तो लोन्स में क्यों नहीं। इसीलिए फ्लेक्सी लोन फ्रॉम बजाज फिनसर्व एक ऐसा लोन जो जब चाहे बोरो करे, जैसे चाहे रीपे करे, वो भी चुटकी में। थिंक इट डन विद बजाज फिनसर्व।
हेलो, हर सीजन के लिए नए इंटीरियर्स।
हाँ, वो भी हर रूम के लिए।
फ्रिज, स्मार्टफोन या बड़ा टीवी,
तीनों क्यों नहीं?
अरे ये तो शॉपिंग लिस्ट में नहीं था।
सो अब शॉपिंग कार्ट में तो है। सॉरी।
अच्छा, नए आउटफिट्स की विश लिस्ट।
विश क्यों? जस्ट ऐड टू कार्ट एंड बाय।
तो ये सब EMI पे?
और वो भी चुटकी में। On India's fastest growing EMI network. Think it, done with Bajaj FinServ.
सर, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता। साहब, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता। हुजूर, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता।
अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान।
अपनों को खुशियां दिलाना आसान नहीं बनाते तो आगे कैसे बढ़ते। इसीलिए हम जो भी करते हैं उसे बेहतर बनाते आ रहे हैं, बनाते रहेंगे। बजाज फिनसर्व, थिंक इट डन।
माँ के बेडरूम का AC या लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई, लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई, लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई। पुणे, पटना, चेन्नई, मथुरा या फिर बेगूसराय,
या फिर बेगूसराय।
नए घर के लिए चाहिए 4K टीवी हाई फाई, या फिर वाइफ को चाहिए लेटेस्ट स्टाइल। EMI है ना, EMI है ना, EMI।
मॉड्यूलर किचन में पुराना फ्रिज क्यों है भाई?
शादी है नहीं, मैट्रेस पुराना है भाई। अक्खा इंडिया बोले भाई प्राइजेस है हाई, बेस्ट ही खरीदना है तो अपने EMI स्टोर पर आए।
EMI है ना, EMI।
अब काशी हो या वाशी, महंगा लगे तो EMI और बेस्ट ही चाहिए तो भी EMI, क्योंकि बजाज फिनसर्व का EMI है ना। विजिट www.emistore.com।
EMI है ना, EMI है ना, EMI।
नाची 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 नाची। धोखा है धोखा, धोखा ना खाओ जी। नाची 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 नाची। इंश्योरेंस फ्रॉड से बचना है बहुत जरूरी जी। नाची 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 नाची। वो एजेंट है या फ्रॉड पता लगाओ जी। एक्स्ट्रा ऑफर के झांसे में कहीं फंस ना जाओ जी।
अगर कोई अनजान कॉलर इंश्योरेंस पॉलिसी डिटेल्स मांगे तो कह देना उनको, मिलके स्कैम को एंड करो, हमेशा सेफ रहो जी। Always verify the caller and do not surrender your insurance for attractive offers. हमेशा सावधान रहे, सेफ रहे. Issued in the interest of public awareness by Bajaj FinServ.
नाची 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 नाची। धोखा है धोखा, धोखा ना खाओ जी। नाची 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 नाची। जो होगा सो होगा ऐसे ना सोचो जी। नाची 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 नाची। कॉल पे कोई पूछे OTP दो ना जी,
तो कह देना उनको,
नाची 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 नाची।
मिलके स्कैम को एंड करो, हमेशा सेफ रहो जी।
Being a hero is all about heart. It's not about ruling the world. It's about owning it. It's not about winning a race. It's about delivering a smile to the human race. It's about a spirit that just cannot be confined by geographies. It's about the heart that beats for the future and a soul that echoes the values of generations. And yet, being a hero is never about the hero. It's about the millions who celebrate them. Hero Motorcorp, the motorcycle leader. There's a gush of wind that hums a sweet song. There's a gush of wind that fights like a hero to fill the world with possibility. There's a gush of wind that jumps across oceans and mountains, embracing the entire planet. There's a gush of wind that blows away darkness. There's a gush of wind that blows for humanity. Because at Hero, we care.
In 1868, the Tata Group was founded on a philosophy that put the community at the heart of its existence. Today, we are $100 billion global enterprise. Our today has been built on enduring values.
But how are things in Canada, John?
Well, Canada, of course, has 4 countries as our next door neighbors. But the only ones we can actually walk across to see are those in the United States, largely to the south. So they're always very special. But as far as Omicron is concerned, I think the United Kingdom is the leading indicator. We're 1 week behind them. So we're already moving downwards, if I could put it that way, in a very bad way. So I fear the worst. The major conclusion is that because of the 3 times or 4 times faster contagion, it's still going to overwhelm the healthcare system, even though if all the people who get into it are less likely to die. But the spread multiplier is larger than the death divider. So we're in for a long, hard winter, I'm afraid, unless Oxford University, AstraZeneca, and the Serum Institute can ride to the rescue with a new vaccine on time. Although we've just invented a vaccine of our own, we didn't have one, and the Americans wouldn't give us any of theirs, even though they were producing them a 2-hour drive away. Who would have thought? Anyways, it was the Serum Institute that came to the rescue. So talk about, yes, globalization, I guess we'd call it now, or south to north cooperation. Is India part of the south? Okay.
Look at the bright sun behind us, and we can see early morning in your place. So we are very much in the south now. And
okay.
But I think Anitaji, time to begin.
Yes. Just for everybody's information, the live streaming is on, so we are all online live streaming. So we'll just begin. I would just like to begin by saying a very good afternoon to one and all, and a very warm welcome to the session on leveraging the power of research community and policy makers, role of Think20. The Think20 brings together leading think tanks and research centers from around the world. It serves as the ideas bank of the G20, with the aim of contributing to research and policy proposals to the G20 leaders' reflections on the big issues related to global governance. The session will discuss and deliberate on the initiatives that need to be undertaken to better engage the research community, policymakers, and the public at large. Particular emphasis would be on addressing the issues related to COVID-19 pandemic, carbon neutral and circular economy, human mobility, digital financial system, food, water, and energy security, besides others. Our esteemed speakers for this session are Mr. Rakesh Bharti Mittal, past President, Confederation of Indian Industry and Vice Chairman, Bharti Enterprises India. Warm welcome to you, sir.
Thank you.
Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, Director General Research and Information System for Developing Countries, India. Welcome, sir. Ms. Anita Prakash, Senior Policy Advisor, Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, Jakarta, Indonesia. A warm welcome to you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Professor Kazuo Matsushita, Professor Emeritus, Kyoto University and President, International Academic Society for Asian Community and Senior Fellow, Institute for Global Environmental Strategies and Chairman, Japan Society for GNH Studies, Japan. Welcome to you, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Professor John Curtin, Director and Founder, G20 Research Group, University of Toronto, Canada. Welcome, sir. I once again welcome all the speakers and we look forward to a very informative session. I would now like to invite Session Chairman, Mr. Rakesh Bharti Mittal, to kindly take the session forward. Over to you, sir. Sir, you're on mute.
Thanks, Arandita. Let me extend a warm welcome to distinguished panelists and wish good day to all the participants because everyone is different part of the world, so it could be a good afternoon, evening, or morning, depending on the time zones. William Wordsworth, a renowned poet, had said, life is divided into three terms: that which was, which is, and which will be. Let us learn from the past to profit by the present, and from the present to live better in the future. I guess this encapsulates the spirit in which today's T20 dialogue will be held. We all know what Think 20, the T20 stands for, but I believe it is an important component of G20 dialogue with leading nations. The deliberations at T20 provide a very deep insight and solid analytical base to the leadership of G20. Recently, T20 under the Italian presidency of G20 presented as many as 120 recommendations, which were discussed across 11 task forces, which covered various areas, including the global health, trade, investment, digital transformation, welfare systems, and many, many more. The deliberations at this panel today will build into the Indian presidency of G20 from December 1 next year. And I look forward to, I would say, words of wisdom and insights from each of the panelists when I call upon you to share your views. Arandita did talk about the themes. So clearly, I think COVID-19 pandemic has thrown up immense learnings for everyone around the globe. New ways to think, new ways to innovate, and newer ways of working. I believe this pandemic has been a very, very tough teacher. And the biggest lesson which I derive from it is the whole world is one community. We've been hearing about the whole world is a global village, but I think it's one community. The collaboration is the key to success, and I believe the human ingenuity, especially in developing the vaccine in record time, really prepared all of us. And there have been immense learnings, as I just mentioned. We also saw limited reaction times, because this was something which hit all of us out of the blue. Very little time to react and move at a very faster pace to ensure that the healthcare system is up to date and we take care of people who were unfortunately tested positive during this time. Also, I believe the need in the learnings, if I would say, the need to have flexible and scalable, proactive approach for healthcare emergencies. I think this is something which the world needs to prepare for. I don't know. I mean, many a times I keep seeing the pandemics or the endemics come once in 100 years or whatever the time frame is, few decades. But I think this has really taught us to be really, really prepared for what we need to do. Also, I believe different variants, newer variants, is creating huge challenge. And clearly, we don't know the potential impact of the new variants. I was happy to see that Pfizer has come out with a pill which they're saying will take care of Omicron, which needs to be seen, but that's how the research and the pharma companies are moving at a fast pace. We are all committed to net zero carbon emissions. And I can say with conviction, T20 can formulate path-breaking strategies for global emission reduction, strengthening the circular economy, and engaging every citizen. We also see emerging technologies, which are providing more and more options for the consumers, human mobility, hydrogen, hybrids, electric, in sync with net zero goal, shift business paradigm, which is owning versus sharing models. And going forward, I would say, in the emerging technology space, we require extensive research and development, innovation and innovative ideas, out-of-box thinking, huge investments, and a robust policy framework for both implementation and adoption. And this is where the role of T20 is pivotal in collaborating across research communities, experts, academia, and the governments, who can then really come in a comprehensive manner, come out with solutions for global issues. I would also add that the private sector will have a role to play in all this. And that is where there could be joint research programs between the industry, academia, and the governments. Let me also say on the financial systems, for sustainable development, digital financial system is the backbone for any technological transformation, which not only reinforces inclusiveness, but also reach, trust, and integrity. And the last point on the theme is on water, food, energy, which are at the heart of sustainable economic and environmental development and protection. I think there is an urgent need for suitably integrated approach for ensuring water and food security, sustainable agri and energy production worldwide. At T20, we need to ensure that the solutions must lead to sustainable and inclusive development by leveraging power of research communities in developing technology, but more importantly, with progressive policies and mass engagement. T20 also brings together global thought leaders from various countries and facilitate cross-organizational collaboration, which goes beyond any geographical limitation. And this is where I think we need to leverage on holistic and pragmatic policy recommendations. In the end, I can say engaging with business leaders will enable to get the relevant inputs and directly approach various agencies relevant to process and post-COVID-19 recovery. This is something which is staring all of us. Let me also add the Confederation of Indian Industry and the tech initiatives which we have. CII has been a front runner in enabling promoting, developing, and deployment of potential technologies through a plethora of initiatives on its own and in partner with the governments, especially the government of India. We started the technology initiatives during 1990s under the chairmanship of Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. And on this 27th edition of the Partnership Summit, I have the privilege to be joined by nearly 200 speakers and experts. And I think this is something which is, it is 1,000. I stand corrected. It's on the screen now. We have 1,000 participants and delegates from more than 100 countries. I believe this robust platform which CII has created, the Partnership Summit, which is an annual event, is a platform for thought leaders, for policymakers, for the industry to come together and engage in a collaborative manner to take on the global challenges. Let me stop here and invite Professor John Curtin, Director and Founder, G20 Research Group, University of Toronto, to share his views. John, you are muted.
Thank you very much. Bonjour, bienvenue, everyone. I'm speaking to you from Toronto, Canada, on the traditional lands of First Nations for many centuries and millennia past. And it's my pleasure to offer you some thoughts, both from my experience with the Think 20 and other G20 engagement groups since they started back in 2010, but also most recently working with Kazuo in the Think 20's task force on climate change, the environment, and energy. Also from the research we've done on the critical question, I think, just how influential has the Think 20 been? And it's not a good news story. We still have much work to do. Since its formal start in 2012, our Mexican colleagues take the credit for that. The Think 20 has properly sought to design and deliver analytically sound, evidence-based recommendations for G20 leaders to adopt as commitments at their summits and, importantly, comply with them when they go back home. So how well does the G20 succeed in doing this? Why do they succeed when they do? And how can they improve their effectiveness in the next 2 years? First, I'd like to underscore the unique advantage of the Think 20 compared to all the other formal engagement groups. There's a total of about 10 now. But the Think 20 is the only analytically focused, evidence-based one, and it's focused on what's good for G20 members and for the global community as a whole, rather than advocating for a single self-interested constituency, no matter how important and large that might be, women, youth, business, labor. The Think 20 thus addresses the full range of the G20 leaders' agenda, including items that they and other engagement groups overlook. And it highlights the synergies amongst the otherwise separate subjects. It thus uniquely matches the unique responsibility that G20 leaders have back home, where they have to deal with all the subjects of all their ministerial portfolios all the time. And it can advance critical subjects that have no engagement group of their own. There is no Health 20. There is no Environment 20. and no one takes care of the indigenous peoples to advocate for them. So it's a Think 20 that has that responsibility. So how well is it done? Well, most broadly, the Think 20's work has coincided with a general increase in both G20 commitments and compliance since 2012. But so is the work of the other engagement groups. And here, the most influential, the one that stands out, is the Women's 20. My colleague Julia Kulik has found that since the W20 started work in 2015, Turkey, G20 leaders' commitments on gender have soared and compliance with them has spiked too. And most recently, the Youth 20's priority recommendations presented in the Summit Background book, which the G20 Research Group does for each summit, for Rome in this case, has had more of its recommendations realized, matched in the leaders' commitments at Rome more than any other engagement group. So in that context, since 2016, the Hangzhou Summit, when we started systematically assessing T20 recommendations that match G20 leaders' commitments, they haven't grown year by year. They started high in Hangzhou in 2016, maybe for very specific reason, plunged for the next 2 years, but revived at Osaka in 2019. And compliance also shows a plunge starting in 2018 in Buenos Aires. What about Rome? Well, only 24% of the Think 20 recommendations matched G20 commitments on the summit's 3 priorities themes. In first place came the Think 20 recommendations on planet, with the commitments on climate, the environment, and energy. They had a match of 30%. So thank you, Kazuo. You get the gold medal there. In second place came people. That's basically health. The Think 20 recommendations on health were matched at 25%. In third place came prosperity. Those are the recommendations and commitments on the economy, a macroeconomic policy at the core. It was only 18%, but that was the historic heart and soul of what the G20 was created to do. Other subjects, it was generally worse. The digital economy had a match of 25%, infrastructure 22%, trade and investment 20%, development 13%, sustainable finance 9%, and education 8%. And due disclosure, I served on the task force on climate change, the environment, and clean energy. But these numbers come from an analysis by my colleague, Brittany Warren. So I couldn't, nudge the figures to make task force 3, I think it was this year, number 1. So what causes G20 to listen to adopt what the Think 20 often wisely recommends? At the moment, the evidence suggests a few candidates. The first is annually assessing the effectiveness of Think 20 recommendations. The Business 20 engagement group used to do it, but the Think 20 tends to, once its summit is over, turn its attention to the next one and not look at what was not only matched, but actually complied with. So I think that needs to be done. I think the Think 20 probably needs a strong permanent secretariat to provide continuous multi-year support for this analysis task and for other things. The B20 has one, maybe several, but the International Chamber of Commerce is always there to serve. It's probably wise to make fewer recommendations. So busy G20 leaders will know what the Think 20 really wants them to do. And I think the Think 20 really needs to present its recommendations sooner, so the G20 leaders and system can use them when their work begins. So for the next 2 years, I think we in the Think 20, and I'll end here, need to assess the effectiveness of our recommendations annually and apply the lessons learned, acquire a permanent supporting secretariat. The Council on Global Problem Solving offers an attractive and available one. I think we need to target the ministerial meetings and the special G20 summits. Those summits started in March last year. So I think we'd better be ready just in case the Indonesians feel the need to do one that soon for COVID, which was the cause. We need to strengthen the synergy amongst recommendations to credibly identify the broad co-benefits for several subjects that a single recommendation brings. And I think we need to forge stronger alliances from the start with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development and other actors, including the other engagement groups. So thank you for your attention and look forward to my colleagues' thoughts.
Thank you, John, for sharing your valuable insights. I would like to now move on to Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, Director General, RIS. Sachin.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Mr. Mittal, for getting us this opportunity and getting all of us together. Thanks, John, for laying out the broad contours, the rationale, the purpose, the ambit, and the scope within which the Think Tank 20, the T20 has delivered. And I think you have very rightly captured all several different roles that T20 has capability of and has delivered. I think one important point, John, here is also in terms of what happened at the South Korean presidency way back in 2010, when we got the idea of having a finance track, but also supplemented by development track, the CII track. And the all effort that came out was largely the T20 effort, was largely the leadership that the Think 20 could provide. And I'm also very glad to note the several challenges that Mr. Mittal have captured so well in his welcome remarks in terms of the idea of coming together. That's what John is saying, that the T20 is basically bringing in all those who have their own engagement groups, but even those who are missing from the table. And these people, as he rightly said, represent the groups from health, from indigenous people, from environment, climate change, etc., etc. So I think that synergy, that compatibility, that ability to leverage their strength, I think comes out very clearly. So both the initial welcome remarks and John's statement have laid out today's panel quite well. Since we have been given 5 minutes, I would be very focused and would just pick up 4 points in my first round, and I'm sure Mr. Mittal would give us some bonus in the second round. I think the 4 points that I want to pick up, the first and foremost, in my view, is the ability of the T20 to lay agenda for the presidencies. As has been very widely shared and observed, this is a unique beginning with Indonesia. Anita ji would tell us more, but I think it's a unique opportunity because it's a beginning for Southern-led presidencies, presidencies that would be led by developing countries. So the idea of developmental challenges, the challenges that are being grappled by these host economies of the T20 or G20, what kind of experiences they are going through. Indonesia, followed by India, Brazil, South Africa, they all represent southern economies. And this is a new beginning. I think Japan has already set the ball rolling with their presidency in terms of human-centric development, something that Prime Minister Modi has been talking about. So what new agenda we place on table is something that the developing countries would have to think of. Having come on the table, having been part of the high table, what kind of role developing countries, and for that matter, the T20 or the G20 members would do in terms of global governance. What new ideas we are bringing on table. And that's where my second point is. We need to put academic institutions, business houses, our science and technology strength all together. And that's the reason why RIS, CII, and INSA, the Indian Science Academy, all have come together. And fortunately, under the leadership of Anita ji, Iria from Indonesia has also joined us in terms of taking this forward. The Faculty of Economics of Business University of Indonesia, LPEM, has also come with us in terms of shaping this new narrative. And this new narrative is in terms of the very idea of floating what is called as G20 Research Forum. So now we are seeing the advantage of bringing in research and evidence-based agenda setting upmost, right up front. That's my second point. The second point is how we bring in all different actors from various other streams to set the agenda. So having come on the high table by developing countries is the first point. What do they deliver? How do they deliver is the second point. The third point that I want to make is in terms of capturing the thematic focus that we have. And the thematic focus comes in terms of the domestic economic growth priorities, but the larger global responsibility. All of us are part of interdependent global economy. And we need to play that role, be that in the realm of managing the world trading system through strengthening multilateral institutions, be that part of the Basel norms for stable financial development, the reforms of the multilateral financial institutions, IMF and the World Bank, the role that AIIB and the new development bank should play, but also in terms of how we govern digital currencies. And particularly in a world where certain most powerful countries with a lot of power on their command are not behaving with the utmost responsibility that they should. The pandemics, the cryptocurrency, and the international debt crisis for least developed countries, particularly countries in Africa, requires the G20 countries to do introspection and bring in new norms for global governance. And this requires the geostrategic and geopolitical issues to be strengthened and reconsidered, not just in Indo-Pacific context, but in the larger context of global governance. So we need to work that out together. My fourth and the last point is in terms of environmental governance, the climate change governance that is needed. At COP26, some countries have again failed and they haven't delivered. I think India is one of the few G20 countries from the developing world which has delivered on Paris Agreement and on our Paris commitments. I think responsible leadership at the global level is something that G20 countries should strive towards. They should see that it becomes a norm and everybody is bound by those globally responsible behavior and the governance mechanisms which we all collectively require in this very difficult phase of economic recession which is impending if we do not bring in financial and economic cooperation that is needed for us to go forward. In my last minute, I would just like to mention one point in terms of strengthening the engagement groups and their integration with the Sherpa process. In the Japan presidency, in the Saudi presidency, and latest in the Italian presidency, efforts have been made to have cross connects between the finance track and the Sherpa track. T20, in my view, should play a pivotal role in terms of collecting perspectives from the South for better convergence of these two tracks. These two tracks have their own institutional ecosystem, their own role, but they should deliver in terms of drawing what is best for the industrial and economic growth of the whole world. Thank you.
Thank you, Sachin. I think you made some very important points. Let me now invite Professor Kazuo Matsushita to share his views. Kazuo?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Rakesh. It is a great pleasure and honor for me to participate in this very important meeting. Currently, I'm doing some work at the Institute of Global Environmental Strategies located in Japan. The aim of IGES is to achieve a new paradigm for civilization and conduct innovative policy development and strategic research for environmental measures, reflecting the results of research into political decisions for realizing sustainable development both in Asia Pacific and globally. I have served as the lead co-chair T20 Summit Task Force on Climate and Environment in 2019 and as a co-chair for T20 2020. Based on these experiences, I'd like to make some remarks. Coronavirus and climate change are two converging global crises. The COVID-19 pandemic is distracting governments around the world, which may compromise the achievement of the two landmark agreements, namely the Paris Agreement and Sustainable Development Goals, particularly Goal 13 on climate change, climate action. Fighting these global threats necessitate effective multilateralism through international coordination and cooperation, and laying the foundation for a strong economic recovery, one that offers a sustainable, balanced, and comprehensive growth after the pandemic. G20 members include the world's largest fossil fuel producers and consumers. 82% of G20 energy supply still comes from fossil fuels. How G20 member countries prevent carbon produced by fossil fuels accumulated in the atmosphere will determine whether the world stays below the Paris Agreement's warning thresholds. Achieving Paris Agreement target requires the inclusion of all energy options, such as expanding the use of renewable energy and ensuring the participation of hard-to-abate industries, the last mile of decarbonization. Build Back Better through COVID-19 green economic stimulus packages should promote a wide range of climate change mitigation approaches to a low carbon future and integrate climate action into economic development and stimulus package. Tackling climate change will now prove more challenging as governments take on massive debts to cushion their countries from the immediate impacts of the pandemic and lockdown measures and recover economically. The policy recommendations by the T20 Task Force to support G20 policymaking inform the public on policy options that the G20 could use to address global challenges and facilitate policy advocacy through profoundly argued, concrete, and implementable policy recommendations. as to what extent the voice of the research and policy community, including T20, is being heard by politicians, lawmakers, and community they serve. This question may be very hard to answer definitely, but already Professor John Curtin has eloquently evaluated this issue with accuracy based on evidences. And I personally feel that we can trace various impacts in the results of international policy forums, notably G20 and COP26 of UNFCCC. I think this year, COP26 was sort of benefited from the argument just back-to-back meeting of G20 and G7 meeting in summer. So finally, it is needless to say that climate science, research, and evidence-based policy making is a critical component of climate change mitigation and adaptation strategy. Therefore, we will have to continue our endeavor of conducting innovative policy development and strategic research for environmental measures in order to reflect the results of research into political decisions for realizing sustainable development. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Azil. I would now like to invite Ms. Anita Prakash. Anita ji, your views, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mittal, for inviting us to this summit and to this important panel. But before going into the role of T20 itself, and having heard three very experienced people who have been involved in the T20 and the G20 process for quite some time, it would be important for me to explain, and especially because I'm speaking at the end, to understand how the mode of interaction between research community and the policymakers actually takes place. And as we all know, typically policy planners work in track 1 among themselves, and the interaction with research is at track 1.5, where the outcomes and research results are not binding on the policymakers. And in that context, perhaps it may also be important to distinguish between academic research from policy research. And the former is largely a supply side activity. But of course, it is relevant to current and future needs of the country or a region. But policy research, on the other hand, is largely a demand side activity. And from my experience, I can say this, that organizations which have built a balance of both supply side and demand side research are therefore and expectedly, in fact, closer to the policy making processes. My regional experience in the negotiations of RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, and even CPTPP is a very good example and a successful one to how policy and research interactions take place. Several rounds of very high-profile track 1.5 meetings and the reports of the expert community. It created a sort of a binding environment, especially on those years when the negotiations were floundering, going nowhere around 2016-17. So bringing this experience into today's panel conversation, from the T20 perspective, I have been participating in this, and now we are in the process of the Indonesian presidency. Sachin has already explained how the South-South perspective has now become very important for the next 4 years, accounting to 2022 as well. The thing is, as a participant in the T20 process, it is now upon us on this group and stakeholders like CII who are expected expected to become a very important pillar of our initiative, is to get the process right. John mentioned some very low figures in terms of utilization or compliance, I should say, in his words, utilization of the policy research that's coming out of T20. And the problem is not very far to seek. The findings are presented to the chair every year, but T20 findings typically connect with G20 presidency at the end of the year when the presidency is virtually coming to an end, whereas the processes of the T20 are over quite early. So the ministerial and Sherpa Connect will be very important, as Sachin had earlier mentioned. And therefore, it is not a surprise, really, that the findings from the T20 are not being utilized as much. And the low figures are also a reason because the T20 research pedagogically tries to address every part of the policy cycle: problem recognition, problem identification, options, choices, implementation. I mean, as I said, pedagogically, this is not the way research can be presented to the policymakers. One really has to pitch oneself at which part of the policy cycle one is addressing. And therefore, the low figures are not surprising at all. So in a G20 context, therefore, besides the task forces that are there, priority of objectives are also important, but this changes from presidency to presidency again. So the global approach to this research policy connect is a little diluted in the G20. The T20 task force on Africa is a very good example. It started with some good priorities, but it disappeared in between, but now more efforts are being made to bring it back. Hopefully, the recovery and rebuilding in the post-COVID-19 years, the need for greater participation in digital economy, the South-South cooperation in the next 4 presidency years, hopefully these themes will help establish a continued and a symbiotic connect between successive T20 presidencies, between the policy-making process, both in G20 and countries outside the G20 too. There's a vast wealth of research that has been accumulated within the T20 process, but very little of it is being used. The policy cycle is moving faster than the research that is being generated within the T20. The COVID-19 and the health cooperation is a very good example. So, which is why creating a kind of a continuation mechanism is becoming very important. And I think that is where our G20 Research Forum will hopefully play an important part. Thank you very much. I'll stop there.
Let me thank all my fellow panelists. Clearly, I think the big insights or intakes which I have picked up is collaborative approach at the global level. The T20 recommendations and findings should be shared more often and at an early stage and should be utilized to its fullest. Global governance and ministerial and Sherpa Connect, I think that is something which will help in taking not only the dialogue forward, but also have a deep impact. We did talk about climate change and on the role of the researchers and policymakers and how do they engage in taking this agenda forward. We have exactly 14 minutes. I will give 2 minutes each for everyone. Let me start with Professor Kazuo. You mentioned on climate change, and I think that is one issue where either the world will succeed together or we will fail together. And clearly, I think that is engaging everyone. Do you think the voice of research and policy community is being heard by politicians, policymakers, and the communities they serve?
Yeah, as I said, it is a very difficult question to answer accurately. But as far as I understand, this year we are in a sense fortunate that we have G7 in London, and then G20 in Rome, and then back to G20, we have COP26 in Glasgow, so that all these discussions are converged to sort of the discussion of how to realize the Paris target of 1.5 degrees. And many research communities, including IPCC, and also policy innovators presented various ideas in that run-up to COP26. So it's a kind of interconnected activities resulted in somehow to cling to the sort of very small window of opportunity for protecting our planet, keeping temperature rise below 1.5 degrees. So in that sense, I think this year we have seen some sort of rebirth of positive interaction between science and policy community with policy-making forum. So that's what I think, my impression that I got this year.
And thank you, Kazuo. I can tell you one of the biggest challenge in reaching a global consensus is the developed world need to walk the talk. And I think this was clearly brought out by Prime Minister Modi, and I can share with you Indian industries backing Prime Minister Modi for this 1.5 degrees. So clearly there is something which everyone has to do. Let me come to Anita. I don't want to give you the last word because you waited long in the first round. Do you think the paths of digital and financial inclusion coincide? And what can be done to bring the fintech services to the common man or common person at the doorstep of every citizen? You're muted.
Yeah. Whether digital inclusion and financial inclusion coincide, the short answer is yes, they do. But the correlation between digital and financial inclusion has several related dimensions which need to be addressed also. Infrastructure and last mile connectivity are the most obvious ones. But access to finance is another important element. Nurturing innovation is very, very, highly recommended in most of the developing economies. Creating pilots, creating facilitative measures around innovation, partnerships, that becomes very important. In general, this conversation is dominated by skills, training, etc. But an equal measure of importance should be given to ecology of innovation being created around the education system. Clearly, there would be supply side and demand side needs also, which will require different strategies and fundings accordingly. But all these must coincide with national priorities. And at the same time, they should also work with global community for regulation of platforms, movement of capital. The progress, of course, is very slow on these fronts, as we all know. But from a policy perspective, these become very important to bring the whole sort of convergence of fintech, e-commerce, and banking, etc., made available to common people, so to speak. but definitely we are on that pathway, no doubt. But the creating the regulatory atmosphere around these two important initiatives will be very, very important. And the one final thing is to factor these technological progresses into productivity estimates. Now, that will be something very important, which I personally feel from a policy perspective, this is important to really find out how much of it is really benefiting our own economy in general and people in particular.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me move on to Sachin. Sachin, we see a high focus globally on alternate fuels to support zero emissions. The fact of matter is that currently we are dependent on fossil fuels. So what do you think are the aspects that would be critical while transitioning to alternate fuels to have any adverse impact on economy?
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mittal. And I think I would just borrow your own phrase that you just now used in starting this second round in terms of consistent commitment by the developed countries. While we all agreed to work together, the idea of we collectively exploring the possibilities of financing and funding together of $100 billion, which were committed as part of climate change, Mr. Mittal, I think is something that we did not hear at COP26. And the financing that is needed for transition that the developing countries require, the switching over to alternative sources of energy that is needed, I think we would have to ensure that the COP26 and subsequent COPs and the global financial mechanisms, they deliver to this. There are, of course, regional efforts like India-EU partnership is coming up, where we are exploring green hydrogen and we are looking into solar energy and its promotion. India with France has already launched the International Solar Alliance. We are working on wide adoption of LED bulbs, etc. So we are trying to do something which is possible. India, through development cooperation in Mozambique, has already supported solar panel production unit. In Fiji and other islands which are grappling with the question of climate change, we are supporting this transition to solar energy and many other dimensions. But I think developed countries would have to ensure that they deliver on their promises, and the G20 becomes a meaningful platform for ensuring finance that is needed, the technology which is needed as part of SDGs and as part of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. We discussed the issues which are related to the technology facilitation mechanism and the $100 billion commitment. Our finance minister was explicit enough in the finance minister and the central bank governors meeting what happened with this. And the knowledge partner of the G20, the OECD, first issued a paper which said all has been paid, and then they did the course correction and it came down to 72%. So I think we need to be honest. We need to bring honesty on the table. As the USTR said at the time of the WTO, I think we need to remain honest all the time when we are on these tables, because we are trying to save the planet. Thank you.
Thanks, Sachin. Let me move on to John. John, the sheer magnitude of the COVID-19 pandemic has clearly forced everyone to reevaluate our approach toward crisis management and preparedness. Do you think the present global frameworks were adequate to tackle the crisis? And as we prepare for future crises, what would you change to foster greater and rapid global cooperation? And if you could also, if I may just add to that, I think the time has come when we need to pool global resources, not only in research, but also in deployment and implementation.
Yes, we need to do several things to start with the second part of your question. One, we need to fund the World Health Organization the same way we do the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. The WHO budget is the same size of one big hospital in one big city, it's not nearly enough. And too many people have died because of that and will die again in the coming years. And only 1/5 of its budget comes from mandatory contributions. 80% come from voluntary contributions. So the WHO is really funded like an NGO. That's got to stop. Secondly, we need to recognize that we have to expand the agenda. Yes, we're properly focused now on COVID and its variants, but what about all the other people who are dying from all the other diseases where attention has been sidelined? So we need a broader agenda, and that includes mental health, which includes dementia, Alzheimer's. Almost all G20 countries have rapidly aging societies, including the biggest, led by Japan, China, South Korea, Germany, Italy, and that means they have more dementia, more Alzheimer's amongst the population. That's a big burden on healthcare systems, and we don't have a lot of spare money. And it's a burden on the next generation. So it's really a youth issue as well as one for the aged. The Japan presidency in 2019, for the first time, put dementia and Alzheimer's on the agenda, but then it was forgotten even under the Italian year. It's time to bring it back. And another one, and I'll end with this, healthy people require a healthy planet. So we're back to the environment. Since the start, the G20 summit leaders have invited an expanding array of the executive heads of major multilateral organizations to the summit. But unless I've missed it, not once had they invited the head of a single environmental organization. Not UN Environment from Nairobi, not UN Climate Change from Bonn, not UN Biodiversity from Montreal, and we've got the Kunming COP coming out, not the World Organization on Animal Health, not IRENA, not even the World Meteorological Organization. The Italians said planet was a top priority, but they completely ignored the contribution, the scientific resources of the entire UN-centered multilateral system. They don't for labor, they didn't for health. And by the way, the final one, they should make the Director General of the World Health Organization at least a permanent guest of the G20 summit, the way Spain is amongst the countries always invited there, if not a full member, the way the executive heads of the IMF and World Bank are. Every economist I trust says the number one economic issue now is health.
Thank you, John. Let me thank all the panelists today for their enriching views and inputs. I think there are deep insights. I can only, as a last word, leave it on the table that T20 should also start talking about happiness quotient around the world. I think if you are happy, half the problems are taken care of, including the health. So that is something which the policymakers, the governments must engage. Arindita, you have heard everything, you've noted. I think let's put this on paper and send our recommendations within CII, share it extensively, and also with Mr. Piyush Goyal, who is the chair, for the government of India to really understand what T20 stands for and what we need to do as the governments and a larger role which India must play. Thank you very much all, and hope to see you in person sometime soon.
Absolutely.
Have a good day.
I would like to thank all our esteemed speakers for a very insightful session. And I'm sure everyone enjoyed this very interesting and valuable program, having had the opportunity to listen to our eminent speakers on the panel and understand the importance of T20 and its impact on the global arena. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here, and I wish you a very good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.